a team is not good or bad. A team might be good or bad fit for the work you need to do. You could take a women's gymnastics team and say, re-roof a house, and they're going to be like, we're going to have trouble carrying the shingles up the ladder. But you want them to do what they're really good at.
Today on the show, I'm happy to have Mike Zani, the CEO of the Predictive Index. They are a talent optimization software. So Mike, what's the current revenue of the business?
105 million, Chad.
And how many employees do you currently have?
230, but we have a distribution channel, which probably makes us, we're smaller at headquarters than we would be if we didn't have that.
And what year was the company founded? And then what year did you take it over?
The company was founded in 1955, almost 70 years ago. I didn't even have a chance to meet the founder because he passed away before I even discovered the company. But I led the investment to refound the company in 2014.
And what does the scaling track look like since you took over?
It had a pretty flat but consistent track from 1955 to 2014. They grew from startup to 16 million in revenue. And we inflected the growth pretty considerably from over the last 10 years, from 16.5 million when we bought it to over 100 million.
So you have some interesting ways of investing and building companies. What exactly is a search fund and how have you used that to your benefit?
My first year at business school, I read a case on search funds. They don't use this terminology when teaching the case at business school, but it effectively is buying a single used company with other people's money. So you pull together a club fund or a single purpose investment entity of 10 or 15 high net worth individuals. You find a target, you make an offer, you buy it. Those 10 or 15 individuals pool together capital, and you install yourself as senior management to run, grow, and sell the company with the goal of returning a lot of capital to your capital providers.
And did you use that actually when acquiring this business?
My business partner and I have done 4 search funds, and this is our 4th platform. And we've used sort of the majority of those same investors that backed us early on when they probably shouldn't have. But fortunately, on our first one, we returned capital and they asked us to do it 3 more times.
So is this now the 4th one in the saga?
This is the 4th one in the saga. And sometimes it does feel like a saga.
And so let's talk through some of the earlier ones. How did they go?
They all had successful outcomes, return capital. Our first business was in suburban Detroit. We bought a manufacturer of rugged docking stations. They built computer docking stations to house ruggedized computers in cop cars, utility trucks, even tanks. And we bought that with 6 million in revenue, grew it to 35 million in revenue, and sold it, and gave us 7 times cash on cash return to our investors. So they said, do that again.
We were talking about earlier in the show. I'm like, I'm going to start investing in you, Mike. It's these types of numbers.
It's funny when you buy a company for 5 times EBITDA and you're thoughtful about growing it and not putting too much expense on it. If you do pull the levers a couple of the right way, you can really get a nice return, especially if you put a prudent amount of leverage on.
And I also want to talk a little bit about your book, The Science of Dream Teams. So what inspired that? What is that about?
Ever since the first company, my business partner, Daniel, and I really took the approach of wanting to succeed, compete with and through great people. And it was actually a stark contrast. When we bought our first company, their talent pool was a mess. And only 4 of the 45 people that we acquired in that acquisition made it during our tenure. So we had to totally retool the company. And it wasn't that the old people were bad. They weren't. They were hired by the old owner to run an old strategy. We wanted to run a much more aggressive strategy. We needed a new team. They don't teach you how to hire the best people at Harvard Business School. They try and tell you how to be a great leader, but assembling that world-class team. So we went on this mission to get good at this, strategic HR, and we became students of the game, if you will. And we first learned about the predictive index at the first company, which was called Ledco, Law Enforcement Development Company. And when we sold it, we tried to buy PI in 2009, and they wouldn't sell it to us, got close, finally bought it in 2014. But when we bought the company in 2014, we were finally in the talent game. Like we're like, okay, we can retool this company, make it sort of sabermetrics for business. And as we started learning and looking at our data, there was such good case studies and we had so many great outcomes that I used some of the company's data conversations with our IO psychologists to really pull together the first book on talent optimization. And I was compelled to write The Science of Dream Teams. It's 3 years old now. 95% of it is still super relevant. Obviously, the pandemic has changed a few things. Finished it right as the pandemic was starting. But it was a great experience and love to give back to other small business owners who are trying to, and not even small, other business owners who are really trying to build world class teams.
So you're in the business of talent and dream teams, especially with the company now. What are some of the few of those core things that are just defining factors in building a good team?
I think it's really important to know what's the type of work you're trying to do. That a team is not good or bad. A team might be good or bad fit for the work you need to do. It's funny. You could take a women's gymnastics team and say re-roof a house, and they're going to be like, we're going to have trouble carrying the shingles up the ladder. But you want them to do what they're really good at, tumbling and power to weight ratio. They're going to crush it at a lot of things. So that team's going to be amazing at certain things. I use that example because they're extreme in their body style, say, and not everything is about body style, but pulling together the right team of people for the work at hand. Sports have been doing this for 30 years and or longer, but they've been doing it with data for the last 30 years. We call it sabermetrics or Moneyball even. And businesses don't have the same tools in which to do that. So it's really what's the work you're trying to do and how do I assemble this, group of people or groups of people in organizations to make sure we pull this off in a world-class way.
It hasn't all been wins. So I want to hear your feeling success story.
Yeah, I was an athlete going into college and ended up sailing in college. And coming out of college, I tried to make my geochemistry degree work, and I worked for me. And I worked as an environmental consultant for a year. But then the passion for sailing was too great. I was a professional sailor. I ended up coaching in the 1996 Olympics. I was making a good living, but I really was questioning the sustainability of my profession and not financially, but just really the ability to have a family and somewhat normal life because I was on the road all the time. So I transitioned to the marine business. So a group of people who were doing a roll up in the small sailboat market asked me to come on board and participate with them. It was a rewarding job. I knew the market. I learned a ton about business. And I first started getting as excited about business as I did about sailing. And on the side, I was still keeping my sailing sharp by competing as a non-professional at the highest level I could find. So I trained really hard for this 1998 World Championships with my partner, and we were among the favorites, won the first two races, but we ended up fourth, it was still good, but it was bitter because we really had a shot at winning. And traveling home from that regatta, I was having this existential debate of what am I doing with my life? And is there really any utility in sailing boats in circles, even if you're really good at it? So by the end of that trip, I committed myself to applying to a top MBA program and in hopes to change the context of my environment and hopefully supercharge my career and actually forever leave the marine industry. I'm proud to call myself a full amateur. I pay full retail for everything in sailing as opposed to I used to get everything for free or at a massive discount. And I'm happy to do it because I love what I do. And I sail as an amateur and love it. And I get to work as a professional.
Well, I'm glad you had that realization, right? Of am I really going to be sailing in circles for the rest of my life?
Yeah, and it's tongue in cheek. I still race and I enjoy the game. It is a cerebral game. But when you distill it to is sailing in circles, even if you're doing it really fast, really the right path here?
I'm glad you wrote the book and you got into the business game. It's doing some great things here. If any of our listeners wanted to get your book or learn more about the business, get in touch. How could they do so?
Wherever you buy books, but there's a website of the book, dreamteams.io, and you can read some sample chapters and even take an assessment on that website and get in touch with me for speaking engagements. Would love to engage.
Make sure to check it out, everybody. And thank you, Mike, for coming on the show. For everybody for listening to another episode of Failing to Success. If you like the show, make sure to subscribe. I'm your host, Chad Galecki, and we'll see you next time.